Hi, checking sound for our online participants. Commissioner Lang, can you hear audio okay? Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to get rolling here. Welcome, everyone. This is the August 13th, 2024 City of Portland Planning Commission meeting. I am the chair, Mary Reno Mera, and I am joined, let's start with virtually. We've got Commissioner Spivak and Commissioner Lang. Just clicking through here. I believe those are commissioners online. And then in person, Commissioner Alexander, Commissioner Ames, Commissioner Patel, Vice Chair Pouncil, Commissioner Routh, and Vice Chair Thompson. And I think I got everyone there. So we are here today with a pretty short agenda. No, did I get Commissioner Ames? I got you, right? Yeah. I kind of did alphabetical, so usually I do this. One item on our agenda other than the typical business items, and that's the Title 11 amendment. So before we get to that, are there any items of interest from commissioners? Okay, seeing none. Patricia, do you have a director's report for us?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Patricia Diefendorfer, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability Chief Planner. I am serving as both the clerk and the planner here today, so pardon me while I get myself together. Just quick little reminders, really. I think that we have landed on a date for an end of summer gathering for September 19th, and we are looking to have the follow-up retreat work session will likely be on October 22nd. I think you've received various emails from Julie, and people have responded with their availability. So that's what it looks like it's landing on. And so we look forward to that. And the only other thing I would say is just a quick update legislatively at City Council. So the City Council did approve the land division code with no amendments ultimately. So that was good. I don't know if I announced that last time, but I just wanted to share that. And then also wanted to let you know that the housing production strategy is headed to the City Council on August 28th. So appreciate all your work on that as well. And I believe that really concludes my director's report for today. Happy to launch into the agenda. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Patricia. Up next is our consent.
Question. What's the time for the September 19th retreat? Is that, I don't have it on my calendar yet, so I'm just checking it.
Okay, the September 19th is the social. We're bifurcating the retreat and the social, and I'm just looking at my calendar really quickly. To be honest, I know we were trying to do.
I know it's end of day. I want to say maybe 4 o'clock start. 4:30.
It's a 4 o'clock start is what we're aiming for.
And location is still TBD,
I
right?
believe location is still TBD, yes. But please, if it isn't on your calendars, please put a hold on your calendars, and we will come back to you with more information.
The retreat, Patricia?
That is looking like it's going to be October 22nd, as I said. Times, I don't know if let me take a quick look here and see if we have what time we have blocked on our calendars for the time being. Let's see. Oh, I'm remembering now. This would actually be in lieu of a regularly scheduled meeting because we believe that we will not have items on the 22nd. So to make this easy on everyone, we thought it'd be best to use a time slot that you're accustomed to having time reserved for the Planning Commission anyway. So that's what it would look like. It looks like it would be October 22nd at 5 p.m. And we may have a more fun location, so stay tuned on that part. But
Funner than this?
more fun than this.
Okay, thank you so much for those announcements and confirmations. Any other questions on those upcoming events? Okay, next up is our consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
Commissioner Routh approves.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
Okay, Commissioner Alexander. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, I believe it was unanimous, approved. Okay, on to our main item for
Mayor,
the.
I
Go ahead.
apologize. If you don't mind, I should have said something else in the report, Patricia Diefendorfer, for the record. Just wanted to note that we were going to get the sort of head nod approval of the Montgomery Park area plan, transmit a letter, commission transmit a letter to council. We had some comments, last minute comments that we'd like to spend some time looking at how we might be able to incorporate those. So if you don't mind, we will recirculate that letter and look for that head nod approval at the next meeting. Just wanted to let all the commissioners know that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Patricia, for that update. So we're welcoming Brian Lando back to Planning Commission. This is a continuation of the Title 11 amendments item before us. Today is a work session, and we hope to advance to a recommendation today as part of the agenda. Before Brian gets started with a presentation, are there any items of disclosure from commissioners related to this item? Okay, welcome, Brian.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me back. Again, I'm Brian Lando with Urban Forestry. So I have a brief PowerPoint where just to kind of refresh on the topic, it's been a few weeks since the public hearing, to kind of summarize what we heard in the public hearing and then provide a little more information on some of the questions that came up in that hearing as well. So I will share my screen and get started here. All right, is that showing up for everyone? Great. Okay, so as a refresher on this topic, under current Title 11 language, the large tree amendment provision will expire at the end of 2024. And staff's recommendation is to remove the December 31st, 2024 sunset clause to make the large tree amendment a permanent feature of the city's tree code. At the same time, Urban Forestry is currently midway through a multi-year project to update Title 11. We're currently updating the Portland Urban Forest Plan and expect to bring that plan to City Council in spring 2025. Following the adoption of that plan, we will undertake a Title 11 amendment project, and that project will align the code with the updated visions and goals and canopy targets that the new Urban Forest Plan will set. So this amendment project will provide an opportunity to look at tree preservation and mitigation during development in a little bit more of a more holistic way. So just to give you a sense of where we are with the large tree amendment expiring and where the Title 11 tree work is going after that. So as a summary of the public hearing that the Planning Commission and the Urban Forestry Commission held, around 60 in-person and written comments were received. The vast majority of those were in support of continuing the large tree amendment. This included statements from organizations like 350 PDX, Portland Neighbors Welcome, and East Multnomah County Soil and Water Conservation District. And we did hear one in-person comment opposed from Fish Construction. Oops, sorry about that. Things a little crazy there. All right. Again, to restate how the large tree amendment changed Title 11's tree preservation requirements. So if you recall, prior to the large tree amendment with the original Title 11 code in 2015, 1/3 of trees that are 12 inches DBH or larger, again, DBH is diameter at breast height. It's the way that we measure tree size. It's the diameter of the tree 4.5 feet off the ground. 1/3 of trees 12 inches or larger had to be preserved or a fee in lieu paid. The fee for not preserving the tree was $1,800 per tree, regardless of size. With the large tree amendment, that's the table on the right, all trees 20 inches or larger are expected to be preserved, or if they are not preserved, the fee in lieu increases to $450 per diameter inch of the tree. So starting at $9,000 for a 20-inch tree and then increasing from there. And one of the things that we discussed at the public hearing was that trees 20 inches or larger represent the largest trees in the city. Only about 13% of Portland's trees reach that size or larger. There are also numerous exemptions to those mitigation and preservation requirements in the city's tree code. Dead, dying, dangerous, and nuisance species are exempt. They can be removed without any fee. Affordable housing projects are exempt. And then importantly, lots under 5,000 square feet and projects with proposed or existing 85% or more lot coverage are also exempt. These last two are important because they encompass 79% of the residential unit capacity in the buildable lands inventory. So where most of Portland's future housing is zoned to be built, the tree regulations are exempt. So the large tree amendment is really a targeted preservation and mitigation strategy for Portland's largest and most valuable trees that are generally outside of the areas where most of Portland's housing is zoned to be built. And just to go over the sort of effectiveness of the large tree amendment, we've seen a 68% reduction in large trees removed in private development. During that time period, 83% of new housing units have been built in those zones that are eligible for the Title XI exemption. And in 2020, an economic analysis projected that just 54 fewer housing units would be built in Portland over a 20-year period from the mitigation requirements for trees 20 inches or more. I also want to spend just a little bit of time on how we use these mitigation payments. That was one of the questions that came up at the public hearing. So I have a little bit more information on that to share. These mitigation payments are deposited into the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund. Those funds are restricted by code to support tree planting across the city. Urban Forestry's tree planting is guided by the citywide tree planting strategy, which prioritizes planting in low income and low canopy neighborhoods, mostly in East and North Portland, but there's other areas of the cities that are included in that prioritization as well. And then you actually see on the slide, there's a heat map from our 2022 tree planting report. So you can see where the majority of those trees have gone. And the fund has been used to plant trees along streets, in residential yards, public schools, natural areas, to about 42,000 trees since 2015. And then this is a look at Urban Forestry's tree planting program specifically, which is funded by the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund. Our program focuses on free street trees, free yard trees, trees on city property, including parks, and trees at public schools. You can see from the table that we've increased our tree planting over the last 6 years from around 1,000 per year to 3,500. And that's the level we expect to be able to sustain for the next few years, given the resources that we have. I also included, and you'll see this starting in 2025 with that top part of the graph in that indigo color. Those are the additional trees we expect to be planting thanks to the Portland Clean Energy Fund. Portland Clean Energy Fund has invested $40 million in tree planting, and that gives us a path to build on the current tree planting we're doing right now, up to 10,000 trees a year in 2028. So really exciting developments. That partnership with PSEF has been fantastic. This work is underway. But this gives you a little bit of a sense of how these mitigation payments have been used to support tree planting, particularly where we need trees most. And then lastly, this is the staff preferred recommendation for the amendment to Title XI. It simply removes the language which has the large tree amendment sunset at the end of December 31st, 2024. And that's the end of the presentation I have, so happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Brian. Questions and discussion from commissioners? Go ahead, Commissioner Ames, and then Vice Chair Tonsell.
Yeah. Hey, Brian. Just if you could explain again the reasoning for putting the sunset clause in And, what was the reasoning for that?
Yeah, so.
Talked about it last time, but
Yeah. So a little bit of the history, it was originally passed in 2016 with a sunset clause in 2019. And that was reflecting on that there was limited time to do the kind of analysis that we typically want to do with a code amendment. It was responding to sort of an immediate crisis and coming up with a solution. We did a lot of that analysis in 2020, and that was what led to the extension to 2024. And then the reason for the 2024 extension was to allow urban forestry to develop a scope of work to update Title 11. So we came back to City Council in 2021 with that scope of work, and that's the sort of three-phased approach that I had earlier in the PowerPoint. The main thing that changed in terms of, not changed, but that we proposed City Council is we had an out-of-date urban forest plan. Our urban forest management plan is from 2004 right now. By code, it's supposed to be updated every 10 years. And so that pushed out the timeline for code amendments because we said we need to update our urban forest plan. And so that's what we're doing right now. And so that's why with that new timeline for updating Title 11, the sunset date kind of fell right in the middle of it. Does that answer your question, or do you?
yeah, I think it does. And then one more time on what the timeline and what the reasoning for moving from the 36 dBH to 20, and how that.
Yeah, so originally the large tree amendment, the version from 2016, set the higher mitigation threshold at 36-inch trees. And I believe that would be probably around the largest 4 or 5% of trees in the city. That's an exceptionally large tree. And so when it came up for renewal in 2019, both the Urban Forestry Commission and the Planning Commission recommended to be lowered to 20 inches to appreciate just the value of those trees. The 20-inch threshold also aligns with the non-development section of the code, which at 20 inches is where more mitigation is triggered there as well. So it brought some consistency between the development and the non-development side.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is Commissioner Pouncil. I was on was that a heat map that you were showing earlier, or was it trees? I'm just I was a little confused on the.
Sure. Yeah, I can. Let me share my screen again so everyone can see it. Yeah. So this is a heat map of. So all the dots are trees planted in that planting year, the 2022 planting year. And the heat map just kind of shows where the sort of density of clustering of those trees are. And that's meant to reflect that we identified priority neighborhoods and that just shows the majority of the trees were planted in those priority areas.
Okay. Is there any way I can get a copy of that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I can send. We put out a tree planting report every year, and so you can see each year street trees planted, yard trees planted, and their heat maps for each of those years. So there's a whole like interactive website that I can send over.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Clarification or additional comment?
Yes. Hello,
ahead.
I'm Jen
Hi.
Cairo, the city forester. Thanks for having me come up. I could see there might be some confusion about terminology. That type of map is called a heat map, but it is not related to temperatures. So the yellow areas are showing the highest density of tree planting done with that tree protection and preservation fund that the mitigation payments go into. And the bluer it is, the fewer trees are planted in that area. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. I think we were all thinking that was aligning with the urban heat island data.
Yes, this is not a heat map.
So Commissioner Alexander and then Vice Chair? I don't know who wanted to go first.
please.
Vice Chair Tamsin.
Okay. I know we've talked about this a little bit already, but I was wondering if you could, again, clarify the timeline and process for updating the fee rates, because if I recall correctly, it seemed like there's already a bit of imbalance between the value of a tree, however that's calculated, and what those actual fee offsets are.
Right.
And based on the age of that data, it seems like that gap is probably just growing. And so if you can talk more about any effort to correct that and what that looks like.
Yeah, great question. So there's a distinction between the large tree amendment as a policy that's in or regulation in code, and the amount of the mitigation required, and that's because the Title 11 sets the policy for inch mitigation. There is a fee schedule that goes to City Council every year that sets what the dollar amount for each diameter inch is. So the fee schedule sets that $450 per inch. The fee schedule could be amended to, say, $650 per inch. So that's an annual process where Urban Forestry sends a new fee schedule to City Council for their approval that sets the fees for that fiscal year. The current $450 per inch has not been increased since 2019. At the time, it was relatively close to the value of the tree. It's obviously lost value over those 5 years. So it is, in general, across most sizes, that $450 per inch would not capture the sort of assessed value of that tree. So that is something I think we would look at through not just our sort of normal fee setting process, but I think as we get into Title 11 amendments beginning next year as well, of what is an appropriate amount to recoup the value of the tree that's lost. There's a few different ways to assess tree value. City Forester Cairo is probably more versed in that than I am, but it would be through that fee setting process that we would do to change that fee.
Okay, thank you. And then one follow-up question. Where was I going with this? I think I just lost my train of thought entirely. So give me a minute. It'll come back. Yeah, thank you.
We'll have Commissioner Alexander. Oops, go ahead. And then maybe
Commissioner
we'll
Thornton,
get your
you're
thought
too
back.
young to have that happening. Some of us lived in that space, but you're too young. Brian, thank you very much as always. This is very illuminating. Under the exemptions, you listed 3 or 4 scenarios: dead, dying, and I guess an invasive species, but it also used the term dangerous. And I recall maybe a month or two after one of our ice storms, there was a story about a family whose house had been damaged by a tree that fell. They had asked prior to that to have it removed, and it was not deemed damaged. I mean, it was not deemed dangerous. I'm curious as to what types of scenarios meet that criteria, because one person's that looks fine to me is somebody else's, I'm at risk, and I'm very concerned that if we wait too long, we're going to have to suffer dire consequence.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that question. I think I might ask our city forester to address that, seeing I think she's much more familiar with how that assessment takes place.
Hi again, Jen Cairo, City Forester. Thanks for the question. So the city's codes, as you've all been learning about one particular part of it, establish regulations that require trees that meet certain conditions to be permitted for removal, regulated trees. And one of those is dangerous. And the way we, urban forestry, assess that is there are definitions in the city's code of what comprises a dangerous tree. And also, similar to other professions, our folks have specific experience and training in how to assess trees to see if they are dangerous or not. And those involve taking into account what might get hit if the tree fails, the health of the tree as indicated by things like are there evidence of rot or fungal fruiting bodies, which is always associated with rot or mostly associated with rot. Is there heaving soil, things like this around the tree? Has the tree had other damage in the past or is in declining health? So perhaps this time of year, we would expect trees to be green of some sort, and they're not. The leaves are dead or gone, for example. So that's part of the process that's undertaken. And internally, in addition to the staff that we have that are trained in this and have years of experience, we have internal quality controls on that, so checking. We have senior inspectors who will check for other inspectors. There's also appeal processes in the city and administrative reviews in case a property owner does not concur with the outcome of our permit review. And relevant to the January storm, which was a major impact for a lot of people in the city and tragic, such as cases that you mentioned. We responded to 785 tree emergencies in a short amount of time. And those would be for any public streets that were affected by tree impacts from the storm, as well as any city-owned properties. And only approximately 0.00127% of our 1.4 million public trees became dangerous or impacted in some way from the storm. So while it was a very impactful event that we all remember well, when we take it in the context of the extent of the forest that we have and how many trees we have, it was a relatively very small percentage of that. I hope that's helpful.
No, very much so. And I guess the only, and it's not so much a follow-up, but a curiosity is, even if you're 99% accurate, is there the opportunity to go back and look at those instances where it did occur to see how they net against the criteria that you identified? Just sort of a post-mortem, what opportunities are there to learn from this?
Yes, good question. For those that are on publicly owned property and in city rights-of-way, because we are also the city's first responders, we have a 24/7 emergency response system called 823 Tree. If you think there's a tree emergency happening, our folks come out right away. They're on site looking at the situation as well as addressing it, so clearing wood or taking the tree down, whatever needs to be done. And there is some sort of review that goes on with those just to see what we think occurred there. And our profession is also always learning. We are required to do what are called continuing education units. A certain amount have to be obtained each year in order to maintain the certain certifications. All of our folks involved in these activities we've talked about, emergencies and regulations, are International Society of Arboriculture certified arborists. And a lot of that training focuses on the continuing learning and understanding of hazards, risk, dangerous tree assessments, and tree care in general. You're welcome.
I'm sorry, you remember?
I did, but come back.
Go for it. Do it.
Before I forget again. So I wanted to understand a little bit more about this idea of tree value. And I know it's a dollar value and it's probably a complicated process to arrive at that, but there's also like the climate value of the tree. And we heard from Professor Shondas how, mature trees offer this climate benefit that's hard to achieve with newer plantings. And so I'm just curious if there's any effort to quantify that, or if that's part of the thinking about how to value on the financial side the removal of a tree in order to provide a somewhat commensurate future potential value with the new plantings. And then I was also curious on the cost. It was like cost per planting. Does that also include maintenance? Is that kind of like baked in? If you're planting, 400 new trees, are you also then maintaining them for whatever that establishment period is?
Right, yeah. I'll take a shot at answering some of that, and then I might ask City Forester Cairo to add anything. I think it's generally accepted that the way that the primary way that trees are valued is called the structural value or replacement value. That's sort of a industry preferred method. It's sort of broadly accepted that it undervalues the trees. It doesn't take into account some of those climate impacts, particularly things like heat mitigation. What is the sort of public health value of the heat reduction in particular in urban areas that trees provide? That's not really included in the value. So I think there's sort of broad acceptance that it's undervalued. I think the industry is always looking for ways to update that. And then to answer your second part of the question, the mitigation fee is set at the cost to replant for what was lost. It does not consider future maintenance costs. Part of it is that the fund that it goes into can't be used for maintenance. It can only be used for planting. But that is a really important part of if we're going to be mitigating, do we have a long-term maintenance strategy and funding to care for those trees after that? So I think that's something really interesting to consider because the current value is not, the current fee does not capture that.
Thank you, Brian. And I'll add, because I think it will interest you, when Portland Urban Forestry plants trees or contractors that work with us plant trees, and we use that mitigation fund, most of the time those trees are also what we call established. So they get essential care for at least the first 3 years of life so that they get a strong start and will be healthy, safe trees in the future. And when it comes to maintenance of trees, there have been a lot of positive developments in that regard over the past few years and yet to come. The Parks Levy, which passed a few years ago, you all might recall, included for voters the concept of, for the first time ever, having proactive park tree maintenance. Prior to the levy passing and us being able to begin that program, our work on park trees, of which there are 1.2 million in our developed parks and natural areas, was reactive only. So if one of you or staff saw an issue and called it in, our folks would go right away and do what they could. That's obviously not the ideal way to maintain any infrastructure. We wouldn't do our bridges or sewer lines that way, right? So when the levy passed, we were able to be funded and have built a park tree maintenance program where all parks are visited on a 3-year cycle. And our objective is to make trees safe and healthy and have long lives. And that's going really well. I'll be happy to share information on that with you at some point. And then looking forward, just this July 1st, the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund has allocated $65 million over the next 5 years for urban forest protection and expansion. And a significant piece of that is funding for us to build the city's first ever proactive street tree maintenance program. Right now, it's the adjacent property owner's responsibility to maintain the street tree, which is a city asset on city property. And also included in that tree protection and care initiative is funding an intention to develop our first private property tree maintenance support funding in the city of Portland. So hopefully we'll have a lot of bases covered in the not too distant future. Great question. Maintenance is, we've found, and Brian can actually speak better to this than I, in updating the forest management plan, we have found the number one concern from the many stakeholders we've engaged with is the ongoing maintenance costs, or the perception of what those costs would be. Given the life of the average tree and the services that we get from the tree, the maintenance costs are actually quite low, but that's certainly not the way it feels when all of a sudden you have a multi-$1,000 bill because of a big tree issue on a big tree.
Commissioner Routh, for the record, just a comment and then a checking of assumptions. My comment, just that bar chart that included PSEF in future years, like I got a little verklempt. I'll just say like that's game changing, and I'm just really excited for it. And then the checking of assumption, my assumption is some of these comments, and I just want to check, like a lot of our comments and questions are this is almost a prologue to the larger conversation, which is the urban forest plan re-up next year, and that this is in some ways, I don't want to necessarily say housekeeping, but it feels like housekeeping of like, oh shoot, before we didn't get to the urban forest plan before this was sunsetting, so let's do this, and then we'll go have the larger conversation then. That's how I'm approaching this conversation, but does that feel right?
I think that's right. It's focusing on, we've had this provision that's been in place for 8 years now. We've done quite a bit of staff work to look at the impact of it, showing that it's preserving trees, finding very little evidence that it's actually hurting the production of new housing. And so I think it's looking at both, this is a good policy that should be continued. Also, we have this great opportunity coming up with the next Title 11 amendment project. I think it's something that a lot of folks have been interested in doing. and it allows us to look more holistically. I think that some of the fair comments that have come up is like, well, how does the tree code interact with other things happening when there's development happening on site? How does it impact with transportation requirements of driveway access and things like that? So I think that within just looking at this amendment, it's kind of like a narrow focus while we have this great opportunity coming up with resources and staffing to look a little bit more holistically.
Yeah, Vice Chair Pouncil for the record here. I'm kind of, how can I say this? So a little bit of a comment and a question, I guess, at the same time. Just looking at the map that you had shown earlier, I mean, and I fully understand that there were some areas on the map that were mainly next to the river that were completely without any trees whatsoever. And it's just so important, that we try to, preserve our river as much as we possibly can. And we know that, a healthy riparian along rivers are just beneficial for everyone. So it would be great if there was a way that, there could be some incorporation either with businesses to be willing to, or to like maybe put more trees on their property that is on the bank or are in, that would provide riparian health. I don't know if there has been outreach to the business community along the river, but there's some really, really deficits, and I'm sure you have noticed this. I think that if more people knew how important it was too, that would also be a real benefit for everyone. Just looking at that map, it was just really stark that there was nothing there, and it's really important, I believe, that we kind of pay more attention to that in any way we can to reach to those communities and say, having trees on your property is not a detriment. It really is a benefit. So that was basically it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate that comment. And I will say that heat map was just from a single year, so we can definitely show multiple years of data to show where the trees are going. But I'll just say that through the urban forest plan, we met with property owners, from the Columbia Corridor Association, which advocate for industrial interests within particularly those areas around the confluence of the Willamette and the Columbia. And there's work going on right now looking at Title 11 exempts a lot of those areas from tree preservation and planting, so there are changes to be made there. But we also talked to them about the Title 11 is a regulatory approach. Is there sort of a programmatic approach? What if there was more engagement with individual property owners to look for opportunities to plant trees on site? And there was some interest in that. And I think our urban forest plan is going to capture some of those opportunities as with some of the funding we're getting for tree planting, are the ways to kind of build those relationships and bring tree planting to these really critical areas of the city. So yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, any additional comments or questions? Commissioner Ames, go ahead.
Yeah, Commissioner Ames, for the record, I think that's what I'm supposed to say. I didn't do that on the first one. So the 40 million in tree planting from PSEF, and you said 10,000 a year. So that's like 40 a work day for a year. Do we have the infrastructure and the space to plant that many trees in a year? And then, the maintenance point, is concerning with that, that influx of trees. And then there's sort of the reoccurring, call it a liability of maintaining the trees. We thought through that.
Yeah, so 10,000 is where we are ramping up to over a 5-year period for exactly the reasons that you stated. Finding contractors or nonprofits or partnering with schools. It's going to be like an all hands on deck effort to increased to that level. I don't think Portland's ever planted at that level. So there's a lot of work going on with specific stakeholders, organizations like Friends of Trees to help to design what can this look like so we can build that capacity. And I think there's great opportunities for workforce development, contractor development opportunities through this. There's definitely the space for trees.
Okay,
When it comes to space, there is space. Our canopy coverage is around 30% right now. Studies that we've done show that we have the potential to be at about 52% canopy coverage. So there's a lot of space for trees. I think the resources has been part of the limitation, and fortunately, we've got some good things happening there.
Thanks.
I'll add that according to our most recent assessment a couple years ago now, Portland's canopy is also in decline. So we've actually lost the equivalent of a Mount Tabor park each year over the past five years. So we're not only adding, we're catching up. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Lang, it looks like you might have a comment or question.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know how to, I couldn't find a little raise hand thing on
You
there,
can use
sorry.
your real hand, that's fine.
Okay, well, Commissioner Lang for the record. My experience with trees from my previous career was how they impacted the sidewalks. And so the trees in the parking strips and the public right of way and the cost to the landowners of the sidewalk repair, which was an annual event for us around the multiple properties that we managed. And that was a not insignificant cost to the property owner each year to make those sidewalks safe and passable. Is there going to be more coordination in the future between the regulations or codes around sidewalk safety and these large trees that every year the roots grow a little bigger and push a little harder on the sidewalks?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on that, and then I'll let Jen jump in too. So that's another issue that we've heard through our urban forest plan outreach. There's a lot of interest in financial resources being made available to help people pay for the repair of sidewalk. Not just, actually heard, even though it was the urban forest plan, we heard not just trees that might be, or sidewalks that may be damaged by tree roots, but just sidewalks in general, because that's another cost that's placed on adjacent property owners. So there is a lot of interest that we've heard. One thing that I could say that's really positive is urban forestry updates our approved street tree list every few years. And so we've done a really good job over the last few cycles of that, of identifying the species that are most likely to have those shallow roots that will damage sidewalks, and no longer allow those to be planted along streets, and ensuring that an appropriately sized tree is planted for the planting strip. So I think we've sort of like set a really good course for the future to avoid a lot of those conflicts. But there are, of course, many trees still out there that have the roots, they might be too large for the site, and that is a cost that is on the adjacent property owner. So without someone from PBOT here to really speak on their behalf, I wouldn't want to lean too much into that, but just to say that, yeah, that is something that we've heard, and I think there is a lot of interest in bringing a solution to that.
So when we go back to those things that Commissioner Armstrong mentioned, the dangerous tree, and you get to a point with a sidewalk where it cannot be repaired without mitigating the tree in some way, and the sidewalk then becomes a danger to pedestrians. Is that one of those factors that is considered in maybe removing a large tree and planting it with a different type at that point?
I believe that is the case. I believe if the sidewalk cannot be repaired without causing damage to the tree that would warrant its removal, then yeah, the tree would be permanent for removal. But Jen, is that exactly how that goes?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So the process we go through is, and the tree inspector is involved, and roots can be cut on trees, and they remain healthy and stable and safe. Of course, beyond a certain point, we can't do that because the tree is no longer viable or safe. And at that point, the tree needs to be removed so that the sidewalk can be rebuilt. I wanted to point out, in addition, adding some history further back to what Brian had said about the approved street tree planting list, a lot of the trees that you may see in neighborhoods that are causing sidewalk effects were probably not planted with permits or predate the approved street tree planting lists. And it is a kind of a bread and butter function of an urban forest program to understand how tree species interact with hardscape and to plan and implement, plant, and permit so that those are avoided in the future. And we've been doing that actively for many years, so you shouldn't see much more of that. Recently, where the trees are permitted. Sometimes well-intended folks plant trees that aren't on the approved list because they didn't go through a permitting process. This will change a lot with the street tree maintenance program, and we have yet to detail exactly how that'll happen. And I wanted to also remind folks that this is not unlike other infrastructure in the city where things at times need to be improved or issues addressed, but they're an essential part of our infrastructure in the city. And the trees are literally one of the best tools we have to respond to the climate crisis, to address urban heat island effect, to have access to nature where people live, which we increasingly understand to be a very important part of health in many different ways, and also to make livable, connected, walkable communities. Thanks.
Yeah, Vice Chair Pouncil. I was curious if there was any distinction between, and maybe you've already talked about this, but if there's a distinction between like a fast-growing trees and slower-growing trees. We know that slower-growing trees tend to be stronger. They have a better persistence, and the fast ones are, fast and weak.
That's correct. Good on you. Yes. The faster growing trees in a traditional, not urban, but more wildland forestry setting are what we call successional species. They're usually the first to move from a more open landscape into a forested landscape, and their job is to grow fast and die young and create better soil and organic matter for the next generation of trees that generally is thicker wood, more cellular structure, and longer lived. So these are all considerations that we include when we're developing our approved street tree list, as well as permitting species for planting in other situations.
Okay, I'm not seeing indication of additional questions or comments. So if you could please pull up the recommendation again, Brian, for our quick review here. I am thinking we are probably okay to do the recommendation today. I would like to go ahead and move as chair that a motion that we do recommend that the amendment to 11.50.040.c, the tree preservation requirement subsection C, any trees preserved shall be protected in accordance with the specifications in section 11.60.030, and that this also removes the sunset. So I make a motion that we approve the recommendation. Is there a second?
Chair Thompson, or Vice Chair Thompson, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
Commissioner Lang here. I've got a quick question. When we first reviewed this, there was the option to eliminate the sunset or to set another 5-year sunset. Is that now not what we're looking at? Is a possible 5-year sunset again to revisit this?
Yeah, I can clarify that. This is our preferred recommendation. I think that was included in the public hearing as sort of a backup option if there was interest in extending it. That the purpose of showing that was to ask that it be extended for at least 5 years. I think if there was not support for removing the sunset clause, we didn't want to get into a situation where it was only extended for a few years, and that doesn't really give enough time to align with some of these other efforts. So I'm only showing this one because that is staff's preferred option.
Okay, and so from your perspective, I guess, with the other changes that are coming over the next year, a reset in 5 years to revisit this and look at everything more holistically and the impacts both on bringing more trees into the city, and if there's any other impacts on development, we're comfortable that those other changes aren't going to be something that may want to be tweaked in that 5-year period.
I'm sorry, I think I didn't quite follow your question.
Well, you're working on more of the Title 11 stuff. This is the one piece that sunsets this year.
Right, correct, yes.
There's more to come, and certainly those carry impacts, positive, we don't know, maybe negative, as those are put into place as well. So I was thinking another 5-year period to revisit in total everything that was done, not just large trees, but that whole package that you'll be working on, rather than just eliminate this and go forward. Or will there be a time to step back and look at everything and revisit again, even if we do eliminate any future sunsets?
I see. I appreciate that. Yeah, exactly. So that is very much what we intend with the Title 11 Amendment project that's going to start late sort of fall 2025, is a chance to look at really how is the entire code working. And we're going to be guided by this updated urban forest plan, which is giving us better information on what Portlanders want to see out of their urban forests, what are different tools they'd like to be made available, and also looking at different canopy goals and canopy targets for where we want to see the management of the urban forests go. And so this is a really sort of isolated provision of the code that's expiring right now. But that project is going to give us an opportunity to, rather than kind of doing this is the third sunset clause date that we've come and gone through this process, rather than staff work being focused on sort of narrow provisions, allowing a more sort of comprehensive project that involves all the different bureaus that are impacted and other stakeholders as well. So I think that's the real intention here, is to allow for that work to happen.
Thank you very much.
I had
Go ahead,
Vice Chair Council with just one more discussion. I did notice that there was the exemption for affordable housing. I just want to just put it out there that, poor people like trees. They like to live among trees too. So if there's any way that we could, preserve large trees, for affordable housing, I think that that's great. I mean, I was just riding my bike by the library at PSU. There's a wonderful example of a structure that was built to preserve a very large tree. I don't see why that could not be done with affordable housing as well. So I just want to put that out there.
Saying that. Yep, agreed.
Okay, any additional deliberation items for the recommendation before us? Okay, I think we can proceed to roll, please. Patricia.
Chair Romero, I just want to clarify that the motion that was on the table is the motion that you're voting on, right? So that's
Correct.
If you would could you just reiterate again that
The motion on the table is the staff recommendation, the proposed amendment with language before us here on our screens. So again, this is the tree preservation requirement. Any trees preserved shall be protected in accordance with the specifications in section 11.60.030, and this removes the current sunset clause from the Title 11.
Thank you, that's sufficient. Thank you so much. Okay, so taking the roll, I'll start with Commissioner Alexander.
Aye.
Commissioner Ames.
Aye.
Commissioner Lang.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel.
Aye.
Vice Chair Pouncil.
Aye.
Commissioner Routh.
Aye.
Commissioner Spivak.
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson.
Aye.
and Chair O'Meara.
Aye. It's unanimously approved. Thank you. And if we could just have a quick summary of next steps, because I know that there is an Urban Forestry Commission, is it this week?
Yep, on
Yeah.
Thursday.
Okay. And so pending that recommendation, it would then advance to City Council, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for your work.
Yeah, thank
And really appreciate all of the public testimony and engagement. It really, I think, helped us as commissioners to see the overwhelming support for this, and also all the data you've presented to this item. So thank you very much. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your help. I appreciate it.